minus 40 degrees Celsius. No food for 11 days. Russian soldiers 20 meters away. One sound and you're dead. This is February 1943, Stalingrad, and one German soldier is living through this alone, hiding in the ruins of a city that wants him dead. For 90 days, he played the most dangerous game of hide-and-seek in history. February 2nd, 1943. The Battle of Stalingrad officially ended. Nazi Germany's 6th Army was defeated. 91,000 German soldiers surrendered, but most would never return from those prison camps. Hans Becker. Remember this name. He was an ordinary 23-year-old infantry soldier. He had set foot in Stalingrad 3 months earlier. He was from Hamburg. His family was still at home, hoping he would return. Now, as his comrades surrendered, Hans made a very different decision. He would not surrender, but escape wasn't possible either. The city was full of Soviet forces. Every street, every building, every pile of rubble meant danger. The Don River was completely frozen, and Russian troops controlled every checkpoint. So he had only one option left: hide, survive, wait. But for how long? Nobody knew. Maybe a few days, maybe a week. Nobody predicted it would be 90 days. Hans's story wasn't just about physical survival. It was about confronting the darkest corners of the human soul. He had to walk the thin line between loneliness, hunger, cold, and madness. And now I'm going to tell you this extraordinary story, because this story shows just how powerful human willpower can be. February 2nd, 1943, at 9 a.m. Hans stood in a room on the second floor of a partially destroyed building. Outside, German orders came through the radios. All units will lay down their weapons, raise white flags, surrender. Hans looked out from the edge of the window. His officer was tying a white cloth to a pole. His comrades were lining up, placing their hands on their heads. Russian soldiers were everywhere. Tanks, trucks, soldiers. Escape was impossible. But Hans couldn't accept surrender either, because he knew prison camps were death camps. 90% of those sent to Siberia never returned. In that moment he decided. He stepped backward, slowly, without anyone noticing. As his comrades went outside, he moved toward the dark corridor. He descended the stairs silently, moved to the basement level, and there, among the piles of rubble, he found a small space. He slipped inside. Concrete, broken bricks, and iron bars surrounded him. He heard footsteps outside. Russian commands, then silence. Hans stayed in that basement for 3 days. He didn't move. He just listened and waited. February 4th, 1943. At 11 p.m., Hans emerged from the basement. Moonlight illuminated the interior of the ruined building. Everything was frozen. Icicles hung from the walls. There was a layer of frost on the floor. When he went outside, the scene he witnessed was more horrifying than his nightmares. Stalingrad was no longer a city. It was a graveyard. Every building was either completely destroyed or half standing. Streets were filled with rubble, tank wrecks, aircraft parts, weapons. Everything bore the marks of war. But the worst part was the silence. No sound of any living thing. No bird sounds. No dog barking. Nothing. Just the howl of the wind passing through the ruins. Hans set himself 3 rules. Rule 1. Never move during daylight. Russian patrols are active during the day. Night is safer. Rule 2. Never stay in the same place for 2 nights. Be predictable and you die. Rule 3. Never make a sound. A single creak, a single cough, a single movement, and it's all over. These rules would keep him alive. On the first night, he moved to another nearby building. It too had been bombed, but the second floor was still usable. In the corner, he found a supply box hidden under blankets, canned food, biscuits, a water can, even some chocolate. For the first time in 3 days he ate something proper. But he knew these supplies wouldn't last forever. And the city was now abandoned. German forces had left, civilians had died or fled. Only Russian soldiers remained, and him, In the first 2 weeks, Hans developed a routine. Every night at 10 p.m. he would start moving. Moonlight provided enough illumination, but kept him dark enough. First, he would listen to his surroundings for 5 minutes without moving, searching for any footsteps, any engine sounds, any sign of human presence. If it was safe, he would slowly go outside. When moving, he calculated every step. He didn't step on rubble, miss. It would make noise. He stayed away from broken glass. Left reflections would draw attention. He always walked close to walls. He could stay in the shadows. Finding food became harder each passing day. The first week was easy. There were still supplies in abandoned German positions, but in the second week these resources dwindled. The third week, he became desperate. He found frozen potato. Some were rotten, but he ate them anyway. One day he caught a rat. Normally he would never eat it, but hunger changed everything. Water was also a major problem. The Don River was frozen. He could eat snow, but that lowered his body temperature. One day he found blocks of ice in the basement of a bombed building. He melted and drank them. Every day was a struggle. But his real enemy wasn't hunger or cold. His real enemy was loneliness. In the fourth week, Hans noticed something was wrong. He was hearing voices. At first he thought it was the wind. But no, these were human voices. Whispers. Someone was talking to him. Hands, hands. He turned around. Nobody was there. He had started having hallucinations. One night, he saw a shadow in the corner. It was human-shaped. It was moving. He drew his pistol, took aim, and the shadow disappeared. There was only a wall. Hans cried that night, because he understood not just his body, but his mind was also shutting down. The human brain wasn't designed to withstand loneliness, and he had been alone for exactly 30 days. He started talking to himself, out loud, just to hear his own voice. Today is March 5th. I survived. Tomorrow I will survive too. He looked at the photograph, his family. He tried to remember his mother's face, but sometimes he couldn't remember. It was as if his memory was being erased. His darkest moment was this one night. He considered surrendering, just walking outside, and surrendering to Russian soldiers, because even a prison camp was better than this loneliness. But he didn't do it, because a voice inside him, the survival instinct, told him hold on, and he held on. In the fifth week, he experienced his most dangerous moment, March 11th, 1943. At 2 a.m., Hans was sleeping in an empty apartment. Not a deep sleep. He never slept deeply. He slept with one eye open, as soldiers say. He heard a sudden sound. The sound of a door opening. He opened his eyes. Didn't move. Just listened. Footsteps. Heavy boots. 2 people. Maybe 3. They were speaking Russian. Patrol. Hans slowly, very slowly drew his P-38 pistol, but he knew, if he fired, he would die. The noise would alert the entire area. Within 10 minutes, hundreds of soldiers would surround this place. So his only chance was to be invisible. The Russian soldiers entered the building. They checked the first floor, then headed toward the stairs. Hans could hear his heartbeat. It was beating so loudly that he was sure the soldiers would hear it too. The soldiers climbed to the second floor. They were walking down the corridor. Approaching the room where Hans was, they stopped. Someone said something. They laughed. And they turned back. They left the building. Hans didn't move for a full hour, because they could come back. This could be a trap, but they didn't return. At 4 a.m., Hans left that building, and he never returned to that area again. That's when he realized he was lucky, but luck doesn't last forever. He needed to be more careful. In the 6th week, everything changed. Hans wasn't just surviving anymore. He had a plan. Spring was coming. It was late March, and the weather was slowly warming, not minus 40 degrees anymore. Ease around minus 10. Snow was starting to melt, and this was an opportunity. The Don River would start to thaw. Maybe he could cross, Maybe he could reach German lines. But first, he needed to prepare. Every night, he was doing reconnaissance toward the river, learning the routes of Russian patrols. They were active from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Then they changed. During that change, there was a gap of 10-15 minutes. That was the moment. But there was a problem. He was weak. He had lost 20 kilograms. His muscles had atrophied. He could only sleep 1 or 2 hours a day. Cold, hunger, and stress had exhausted his body. One day, he knelt down by the water. He looked at the surface of the water, and he couldn't see himself. He looked like a ghost. Face sunken, eyes deep in their sockets, beard grown out. He didn't recognize himself. "Is this me?" he whispered. That's when his family came to mind. His mother, his father, his little sister, would he ever see them again? He decided he would. In the 9th week he was ready. April 28, 1943. Keynes made his final reconnaissance. The river hadn't completely thawed, but large portions were now water. There was a gap in the Russian patrols and approximately a 200-meter area. He could get through there, but he would need to swim. And the water was ice cold. It could kill through body temperature loss in 5 minutes. He had one chance. April 29, 1943. At 1:30 a.m., Keynes looked at the ruins of Stalingrad. One last time. He had spent 90 days here. He had survived for 90 days. Now it was time to go home. He silently moved toward the river. Rubble, ruins, dark streets. He was seeing all of it for the last time. He reached the riverbank. He could hear the sound of water. Russian patrol sounds were distant. He took a deep breath and jumped into the water. The water was ice. It was the coldest thing he'd ever felt in his life. His lungs couldn't breathe. His arms and legs cramped up, but he kept swimming. 50 meters. His arms were numb. He couldn't feel them anymore, but they were still moving. 100 meters. For a moment he thought he would drown. He went underwater, but he surfaced and continued swimming. 150 meters. His vision was blurry. Everything was spinning, but he could see the opposite shore. 200 meters. His foot touched the ground. He climbed ashore and collapsed. He lay there for a minute. He couldn't breathe. He was freezing, but he knew he was safe. Hans Becker was found by a German patrol unit on April 30, 1943. At first he was thought to be an enemy bee because he now looked like a skeleton, but when he spoke German, they understood who he was. He was taken to a hospital. Doctors were shocked. He had lost 24 kilograms, was on the verge of hypothermia, about to die from dehydration, but he was alive. After the war, he returned to Hamburg. He reunited with his family and told his story. Nobody believed him. Surviving 90 days alone in Stalingrad was impossible. But a historian, in the 1970s, found something in the Stalingrad ruins. A small basement. Inside were German military supplies. A name was written on the wall. Hans Becker. 1943. I survived. Hans's story is now in official historical records as one of the most extraordinary survival stories of World War II because he refused to believe in the impossible, and that kept him alive. This was the story of the man who survived 90 days alone in Stalingrad. A reminder, human willpower is more powerful than you can imagine. Hunger, cold, loneliness, fear, all can kill. But not giving up, continuing to fight, struggling to survive one more day, that is true strength. Hans Becker died in 2001 at the age of 81, but his story still lives. And maybe, just maybe, if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, you'll remember, if a man could survive 90 days in Stalingrad, you cannot understand how powerful human is. Now we are coming to the end of the story. If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.